Finally, we have an organization that is not going to take this lawsuit out in Missouri laying down. We have an organization that is willing to stand up for what is right for consumers on both the buy side and the sell side. Brian here with Lamacchia Realty, and I have an article pulled up that talks about Northwest MLS. Of all people, this is probably the last organization that I would have thought would actually be the one that I'm going to be cheering on, because the reality is they are making a lot of sense, and the settlement, the terms of the settlement that NAR has established don't make much sense. It is kind of skirting around the issue of these decoupled commissions that the Department of Justice is so adamant about making that happen. So let's dive into the article and talk a little bit more about it. So the Northwest MLS criticizes the $418 million NAR settlement agreement and opts out. The regional MLS said that the nationwide settlement agreement eliminates compensation transparency for buyers and restrains choices for sellers. I agree. Northwest MLS, the largest multiple listing service in the Pacific Northwest, will not take part in the $418 million agreement reached by the NAR in the Sitzebur case. In fact, NWMLS said that its own rules on buyer agent compensation are fairer and more transparent than the terms NAR agreed to in March. It also criticized NAR for pushing, quote, consumers and brokers to make secret deals off MLS, inviting deceptive practices, discrimination, and unfair housing. All true. Secret deals. The NWMLS Board of Directors made the decision to opt out of its most recent meeting. The organization said Tuesday, NWMLS is member-owned and not affiliated with the National Trade Association, although it was eligible to join in under the terms of the settlement. Right, so the terms of the settlement, they basically said if you are an MLS or you are a real estate agent, if you're a realtor, you can participate in this should you choose to do so, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. It has roughly 35,000 members and could have been released from claims if it contributed roughly $100 per member to the settlement fund, or $3.5 million. But doing so would have bound NWMLS to the NAR settlement terms, and that was unacceptable to the group. Hear, hear. NAR's proposed settlement agreement largely duplicates the rules and practices in place in NWMLS service area for several years, with one notable exception. The settlement agreement eliminates compensation transparency for buyers and restrains sellers' choice by prohibiting sellers from making offers of compensation through the MLS. I have been talking about this a lot, and I've said that the new rules that NAR has settled on is really no different than what is currently happening. The only difference is now that it is way less transparent. So instead of making that offer of compensation in the MLS for everyone to see, now it's behind a curtain. So you can't see. If you are a consumer moving forward, you are no longer going to be able to see that information in the listing itself. And not to mention, you as a listing agent, you can now potentially open yourself to all kinds of problems moving forward, because if you offer a different compensation to different agents depending on who you're talking to, that is a real problem, and it's a real possibility. I haven't seen it myself, but I've heard of stories where things like that can happen. So there's a whole host of issues with the way that the NAR has set up this new structure, and NWMLS has recognized that, and they're doing something about it. Instead, the settlement agreement allows for offers of compensation, quote, off MLS, where that information is hard to find and not available to all buyers and brokers. That change is a step in the wrong direction and is detrimental to consumers and brokers alike. Completely agree. NWMLS said its rules and forms, together with the recently revised change to buyer representation agreements, provide for consumer-friendly brokerage relationships and strong transparency. It also cited its 2019 elimination of a requirement that a seller offer compensation to the buyer's broker, as well as changes in 2022 that require any compensation to the buyer's agent to be set and paid by the seller rather than the listing broker. NAR's removal of compensation transparency from the MLS pushes consumers and brokers to make secret deals off MLS, inviting deceptive practices, discrimination, and unfair housing, NWMLS stated, depriving buyers of information about the transaction risks, harming buyers, especially those buyers who are already disadvantaged, including first-time homebuyers and members of protected classes. All this makes perfect sense. Prohibiting offers of compensation in the MLS also unnecessarily restrains the seller's choice and absolute right to offer compensation to a brokerage firm representing the buyer. Exactly. So and under the new rules, a seller is still going to have the option to do that, but it's not going to be in MLS, which again, I think is a step in the wrong direction. The NWMLS said it plans to revise its forms and listing processes in mid-August to ensure that sellers are aware of an option that currently exists when listing property for sale. NWMLS has not been named as a defendant in any of the lawsuit cases, although it has scrapped with the Department of Justice over its statement of interest in the No Select case. So they may not be part of a commission lawsuit right now, but you can bet that moving forward, someone is more than likely going to challenge this. But I think it is one of the smartest ways to do it. And what they're saying basically is we want to still give sellers the option of offering some type of buyer agent compensation. And we also want to do it above board. We don't want these secret deals going on. We don't want, for one agent to get 1%, one agent to get 2%, another agent to get 3%. And it just makes perfect sense to me, right? I mean, that's just a normal way of doing business. What's interesting is that they're the only one, like all the other MLSs have signed on the dotted line. They're like, okay, I'll just participate, right? And it's probably more out of self-preservation than anything else. But obviously that the MLS has a vested interest in making sure that field exists, because if the field doesn't exist, then why do you need MLS? You really don't, right? Because there are other places that people can go to list properties. Zillow, Redfin, you can list that on a whole bunch of other websites, and you don't necessarily need the MLS in order to do so. So there's kind of that angle to look at it for, in terms of self-preservation on their part, because they do obviously want to continue to be in business. But at the same time, what they're saying makes perfect sense. The Department of Justice, what they want to do, in addition to decoupling the commissions, they want to get rid of this blanket offer of compensation. And I think that's the crux of the argument here, is that, okay, even if you list it in the seller, right, this is a separate field, this is a seller concession, this is something that the seller is offering. This is not shared commission between the listing agent and the buyer agent, right? This is something separate that the seller is deciding to participate in and contribute to. But the question becomes, if everyone in that market is offering some type of incentive and blanket offer of compensation to a buyer agent, even though it's done directly by the seller, have we necessarily changed anything in the market? And I would say long-term, probably not. But the reality is if you don't offer it, the only thing that's going to change is that the offers themselves, when they're made on these homes, it's going to include some type of buyer agent compensation. So that's going to be 95% of the offers out there. And the ones that don't have that buyer agent compensation in there are probably going to be offering less. So again, at the end of the day, the seller's got to look at the net number and what makes the most sense for them in terms of the sale price and the terms of the offer. And ultimately, no matter which way you slice and dice it, that's how it's going to all play out. What do you think? Is this a smart move by NWMLS? Do you think other MLSs are going to follow suit and kind of look up and be like, that actually makes a lot more sense, because we want transparency in the marketplace, and presumably the DOJ does as well, because this is an antitrust case, right? This is about collusion, and where do people collude? They collude in private and in secrecy, and the terms of the NAR settlement is heading back in that direction, and that's clearly not what the Department of Justice wants. So I think this is a fantastic solution. Give the seller an opportunity to offer some type of buyer agent commission. And that may not be the end all be all. And it may be, it's not necessarily compulsory, and it's also not obligation per se. Again, there could be terms of that agent compensation. It has to be a full price offer or something like that. I don't know what the stipulations would be, but I think that's a step in the right direction, rather than not putting it out there and just having it done via text messages and phone calls. That's not the way to go. But those are my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you think. And if you do enjoy content like this, I just kindly ask that you smash the like button and maybe hit the subscribe button as well to see future videos similar to this. Thanks for watching. Take care.